Sometimes, exploring in others' footsteps leads you back home. I'm author and researcher Mike Luoma. James Mavor in Byron Dix's 1989 book MANITOU, The Sacred Landscape of New England's Native Civilization, a significant and influential study of possible ceremonial stone landscapes, came recommended to me early in my field investigations, and not only synchronized with the sights I was seeing, the Upton Chamber, Vermont's Calendar One, it revealed a hidden history of the place, the very neighborhood where I'd grown up. Reading while visiting my childhood home, I found I was sitting in what was once Okukanganset, an Indian praying village founded by Puritan minister John Eliot in the mid-1600s, and discovered the oldest documented stone row Mavor and Dix knew of, maybe 3,000 years old, had been found less than a mile away, but dynamited 40 years ago to make way for a new connector road. I remember when they began that new road in the woods, and recalled that there had been people looking for Indian artifacts. But mostly, I remember us riding our bikes on the new highway before it was open to cars. I've driven past this place hundreds of times since. Didn't know it had a name, the Flagg Swamp, until recently. I'd also had no idea they'd found a Native American rock shelter with material dating back 3,000 and more years, including that old stone row, right here, or where the highway is now, to be more accurate. I followed an old stone row in off the road, and it led me down into a wetland, where this curious assemblage sits amid the marshy streams. Nearby, the stone row rises up in the middle of the little marsh and over a bit of bedrock. This looks like possible effigy work to me. The row rises up out of the marsh and heads northwest towards the very ridge where the now dynamited Rockshelter used to be. It's interrupted by a chain-link fence as it runs up the hill towards the highway. Thanks to a huge gap in the fence, I was able to go around and we can see this stone row where it picks up again on the other side. It is running towards the ridge where the Rockshelter used to be. It looks like it might have reached it east of the shelter on the end of the hill, before the highway cut through. I see several possible effigy forms, one after the other. We're close to where they found that 3,000-year-old stone row. I think this stone row could be that old as well. The effigy rows could be later constructs to honor ancestors who once lived here. The locations of those so-called Indian praying villages were chosen by Native Americans, not Reverend Elliot, and they were said to be holy places. The now destroyed Rockshelter may have been the reason this was a holy place. The nearly complete skull of a large 300-pound male black bear was found ritualistically buried just outside the low stone row next to the Rockshelter. Daniel Gookin, assisting Elliot in the praying village's efforts, wrote that the Native American stone walls here were bad fences, running through their cornfields and apple orchards, too low to keep out English livestock when it later showed up and trampled their fields. Mavor and Dix cite his writings in MANITOU, and then note, quote, "But these may have been ritual stone rows, not fences, and Elliot may have sensed it." End of quote. That's because Elliot wrote that some Indians in this village professed Christianity, yet kept to the old religion. And there are many more stone rows running through this swamp, as you'll see, with possible effigy forms in this possible CSL, ceremonial stone landscape. I was surprised to find something else here, too. Possible large-scale Great Serpent stonework, which I thought was unique to Vermont. This stone row went up and over some very interesting features we'll look at in a few. With the highway cutting off the stone row I'd been following, I made my way back across the little marsh and over to where this larger stone row picked up next to a boulder pile, just off the old road I'd come in on. There are possible effigy forms here. As it heads back into the swamp, it curves around a stream. Eventually, the stream runs through it, without disturbing the stone row. The deeper I got into the swamp, the more effigy forms seemed to appear in the stone row, one after the other. Possible eyes, side fins, ridges, ridge fins, jewels, horns. This side of this gap in the row is really something. This stone row continued even further west into Flagg Swamp, then made a sudden turn north before dwindling down beside another brook. A little further south in the swamp, just over a stream, sat this end of a winding stone row. Very curious markings on the stones. It could be an effigy form. Shaped? Carved? Pecked? Possibly. I looked to see if there were any possible alignments, and it could be facing a summer solstice sunrise alignment. There were more stone rows crossing the swamp, and some glacial erratics with curious shapes, as well as other interesting, possibly shaped stones. Most of these seemed concentrated towards the area where the Rockshelter had been. As a matter of fact, the possible large-scale Great Serpent stonework I found was almost right next to it. That first stone wall I showed you went right over this ridge. What I've been finding on exposed bedrock, ledges, ridges, are what I suggest are attempts to kind of serpentize the ridge or ledge. First by texturing the bedrock surface and accentuating any natural protuberances or protrusions to make them look like horns, fins, feathers, wings, whiskers, armors, gills, and other features of the great horned serpent of Native American legends. And I found giant wing boulders perched on the side of this ledge in Flagg Swamp. There are boulders beneath these, supporting them. Closer examination reveals many details. Look at the shaping of the stone. Look at how this stone and back spaces the possible wing stone from the ledge. Stopping and studying these from all angles, it's hard to see them as anything but human handiwork. I didn't expect to see this here in Massachusetts. I found it originally in Vermont, near the shores of the old Champlain Sea. The Rockshelter's people still showed a preference for sea fish in their diets. The same seagoing ancestors could have been here. There are accompanying effigy stones next to the adorned ledge. Back on the other side of the first little marsh to the south, a small exposed bedrock ridge is also done up with possible serpent work. This wraparound wing is kind of stunning. The other side of the ridge sees several boulders and stones added as possible fins. And near the rear, tail fins. Another ridge, a little further east, also appears to be worked to resemble the side of a serpent. I'm beginning to wonder if there wasn't a development from possible large-scale Great Serpent stonework to a slightly smaller-scale serpentized landscape, to serpent ridges, to stone serpent rows and effigy rows, over thousands of years. From a sort of realistic portrayal down to a more abstract and natural portrayal. It was a fascinating experience to discover that all this had been less than a mile from where I grew up that whole time. And to only find it now thanks to Mavor and Dix and their amazing book MANITOU, well, that's kind of something. As I said, following in others' footsteps brought me home. I'm author and researcher Mike Luoma. Thank you for experiencing some of Flagg Swamp with me.